Hi everyone, this is Oscar versus Alex, round 3, played on the 2nd of March. Let's get into it. E4, mouse cursor off there, E4, C5, and F3, so we got Sicilian, so far, Sicilian Dragon, okay. You don't see these very often anymore because H-pawn hacks, the Yugoslav attack, you go F3 and end up marching the H-pawn up the board. It's just so devastating, it's just so hard to deal with as black. Even if you know your lines very well, it's still a terrifying attack to deal with. But in this case, it looks like Oscar's gone for a classical. Bishop G7, F4. My recollection of this opening is that's playable. It's not like a main line. Yeah, so here castling and Bishop E3 are the main two lines. F4 it looks like it's playable, but it's a bit off the beaten track. Okay, so castles, Bishop E3, Knight C6. This is all pretty standard moves. Sometimes I remember F4 can often be a bit of a pain to do. Like it can cause problems in that this bishop doesn't have a defender. And there's moves like Queen B6, which can be very irritating to deal with. Like Queen B6 straight away, for instance, and the Queen's threatening to zoom in here and take this pawn. And there's no good discovered attacks, because if the knight ever moves, the Queen takes the bishop on E3. So Queen B6 check is something I would have a long think about in this position, about whether or not it should be played. I'm just looking at the engine analysis, and the engine wants to do some weird things like Queen D3 or Knight A4 in order to answer this move. So it's probably a good choice. Bishop D7. That's sort of a standard sort of Sicilian dragon move. The bishop just sits on D7. White probably, I don't know, I kind of prefer White's position. We'll see how it goes, but I really do think Queen B6 needed a good long look at. King H1, okay, that just eliminates tactics along this diagonal. That's pretty normal to do this sort of thing. Rook C8, yep, rook on the C file. And quite often the rook goes on the C file, and in normal dragons without this F4, the knight goes to E5 and jumps into C4. So black is probably going to be looking at something like Knight A5 and then jumping into C4. Okay, Bishop F3, that doesn't, yeah, that means the knight, there's nothing to trade for that knight. I like Knight A5 straight away now. Looking to jump into C4, threatening the bishop, threatening the B-pawn. This is just a pain to deal with. I'm not sure how White should answer this. What White's trying to do is White's looking for the right time to bust through the middle with either E5 or F5. And that's the general idea, but you kind of want to get yourself developed first. Queen D2, rook across, and then bust it open. Or in some cases, you might go Queen E1, and then throw the other rook on the D file, and then bust it open. The idea behind E1 and not E2 is the Queen has this diagonal here. It can zoom out. It can zoom out to H4, for instance, and get up to a bit of mischief over there. So yeah, I'm not sure how to deal with this. According to the engine, E5 is dead level. You go E5, 98, and then Queen E1 according to the engine, or Queen E2. Yeah, either way, it's looking like Black's doing okay. Black has got quite a bit of pressure on the center now with this bishop line and the pawn attacking the e-pawn, and the knight's going to be jammed in C4 pretty soon anyway. Yeah, instead of E5, I'm not sure what Black would do here in this position. This knight move would have been really a big problem for White. Bishop back to G1, for example, so that the bishop's not on pre when the knight gets into C4, something like that. It's just tricky. But Black didn't play Knight A4. Black just took on D4. And you can understand the decision. White's got more space, so Black generally wants to trade pieces so that his cramped position isn't so cramped anymore. Generally, if you've got more space, you want to avoid trades. If you've got less space, you want to trade. So the decision makes a lot of sense. I just think this is just far stronger, Knight A5. Okay, so takes, Bishop C6. Yeah, it looks pretty good to me. Puts pressure on here. This is, yeah, the pressure on Z-pawn is reminiscent of a knight-off type position. I mean, white probably should be looking to try and find a way to get E5 in, and then just keep putting pressure on the E-pawn. The problem with a move like E5 is it leaves you with a backward D-pawn, but black does have to go for a break. He has to go for E5 or D5. E5 usually is not an option, giving yourself this backward D-pawn, but things have changed because there's a pawn on F4 now. So a move like E5, if the pawns trade, you get rid of your backward pawn straight away. And if he doesn't trade, yeah, like if he just leaves it there, you can then trade yourself and give him an isolated e-pawn. And with the bishop, the knight, and the rook on the e-file, you know, that compensates you for the weakness of your d-pawn. But yeah, black definitely needs to be looking to make these one of the pawn breaks. Can't just let white own the center for forever. Queen d2, yeah, I'm not sure this is the spot for the queen. I love queen e1 as an option. You know, you just get the queen over to here. The rook can take its place on the d file. The queen can swing out if it wants to, and the queen on e1 supports an e5 push as well. You know, queen e2 also I think is better than d2. Just putting it behind the d pawn. I mean, you got to worry about tactics on this bishop. I don't think there is anything. The knight. You know, where does the knight actually move? The moment it moves, you just trade bishops off. And, you know, you can't do stuff like this because it trades bishops and then grabs the knight here. Although there are some trickiness here, like here and then there, but yeah, the bishop comes back and takes the knight. So, so yeah, queen e2, queen e1, they're the sort of things I'd be looking at. So queen d2, yeah, I think the queen's going to have to move again because it doesn't really want to be there. Let's see what happens. Now, you know, queen c7 makes a lot of sense. You know, the queen's going to support e5 here, but just going back, I noticed the engine suggesting e5 straight away. What's the logic here? Oh yeah, the bishop is pinned. It can't take the e-pawn back. So after takes, bishop can't take here because if queen takes queen, the bishop would have to go back, allowing the trade-off of queens. And black's position, honestly, is starting to look really nice. You know, like rook fd8, for instance, and black's the one with the better pieces. And this bishop is just awful. I mean, I guess this bishop isn't too good either. Yeah, but black is better. Black's got first dibs on these files. So e5 straight away, taking advantage of that pin tactic. Definitely looks like the sort of thing you should be looking at here. And I mean, what does white actually do? He has to retreat his bishop, I guess. You know, so bishop e3 comes to mind. Keep in mind, moves like this are just terrible usually because b6 and the bishop's trapped. There might be a way for white to bust this out. It requires quite a bit of careful analysis. According to the engine, black doesn't just win a whole piece because of takes. And yeah, the idea is this pawn is pinned. He's threatening to just swap queens and then go bishop b6. Interesting. So the pawn can be taken. Yeah, the engine lines are very interesting here. After b6 takes, knight d7 is the move. Just giving up this extra pawn here with the idea of this pawn's defended and this bishop is trapped. White's going to have two marauding pawns down the middle, but yeah, black should have the advantage there. Should probably be a pointed material up or something. So yeah, e5, that would have been great. But instead queen c7 was played, which is a logical looking move. It defends e5 through the d-pawn, x-ray defense, putting doubling on the c file, you know, and you're looking to maybe charge this pawn up the board and use your queen and rook down the c file. White now played queen e3, so now he is threatening to take this pawn here. So black played b6. And yeah, every single move here, white should have been looking at e5 and f5, and it looks like he's finally decided time to bust it open. And I'm not sure if the variations are going to work out well for him here. It's very interesting. After takes, maybe bishop takes was the idea. But I don't think black should be too unhappy with this. He's got the queen and bishop battery along this diagonal, and yeah, he's got a central pawn majority versus a queenside pawn majority, but with the rook pressure down the c-file, the queenside pawn majority might not be that strong. Not that this center pawn is all that strong either. Interesting. It looks kind of level. Looks kind of level. If he takes with the pawn instead, trying to go for an advanced center pawn and get some sort of advantage, this is also very interesting, like 98. Well, when you get to these sort of situations, you got to be really keeping a close eye on this e6 move here, with the idea of doubling your opponent's pawns and leaving him with an isolated pawn at the end of it all. It doesn't look like that does anything. It looks like you might be able to just push past it with f5 if you want to, and this pawn is probably overextended. I don't think white's going to get enough piece play to compensate for how advanced this pawn is, and it's just going to get surrounded and mopped up in the endgame, leaving black effectively a pawn up. Yeah, so I think the idea was this, and yeah, I think this is what black should have gone into, but it doesn't look like he did. After e5, he played 97. Oh, this is you're in serious danger of ending up with an isolated d pawn here, or a very exposed queen, giving your opponent free tempos on your queen. So what he did, I think, was great. You just take on d6. And black's got some decisions to make. If he trades bishops here, he's going to have an isolated d pawn. So in order to avoid the isolated d pawn, taking with the queen seems like the way to do it. But then something like rook a d1, it's just, how do you deal with that? I'm just trying to analyze it. It's tricky. He's threatening to just trade bishops, just win a piece. And if black trades bishops, this has got to be good for white. This pawn is toast, isn't it? It's gone. I don't think you can get away with things like queen c5 because maybe you can. I don't know. I'm looking at tactics with the knight only defended by the queen. I'm looking at this. Queen c5 and the knight's left a bit undefended. According to the engine, though, there is nothing there, and white's just winning. White's just much better. Yeah, so after rook a d1, it's just, knight f6. I mean, just let him have the discovered attack. What about something like bishop here? I mean, is there something to that? According to the engine, no, because there's moves like queen here, which is quite interesting, because if the bishop takes here, then the queen comes in here. White's got two passed pawns, but they're isolated and separated. This is en prise. This is just a mess. Crazy mess of a position. Black's going to get a lot of pressure on these pawns, but this is going to get mopped up. Ugh. Okay, getting my brain around that is tricky. But surely these complications are better than what he did, which was running straight into, oops, sorry, not running to that, which was allowing himself to get the isolated pawn. So black took here, white took here, and then black's got an isolated pawn, and this is just this is very tricky to deal with. Black's going to get very passive trying to keep this pawn safe. The idea is defend it for as long as you can, and then choose the right moment to go after white's pawns. Get your rooks active and just abandon this thing. According to the engine, it's around about level, only slight advantage for white, but it looks like a very big advantage to me. Rook a d1, that's good. Bishop takes. This bishop takes a good idea. I mean, how else does he defend this pawn, actually? The engine's saying b5. Like, what? What is this? How do you answer that move there? Oh, the knight is pinned to the c pawn. That's the idea. Okay, but what if he grabs this? Okay, you take the bishop, then play b4, then grab the c pawn. See, oh, hang on, isn't this knight en prise? Whoa, what's going on here? Takes, rook takes, knight b6. Ah, clever engine. I didn't spot that. The knight jumping into c4, isn't that cool? Hitting the rook and hitting this here. The idea is you just abandon this pawn, but your activity of your knight and your rooks is so strong, you're going to get your pawn back and have a lot of pressure on the remaining pawns. Okay, where was I? Rook a d1. Okay, so black's played a pretty sensible reply, just taking, and then rook fe8. Okay, defending the d pawn through back row mate tactics. White probably should just move one of these pawns, you know, h3 or g3 or something. h3 looks a bit better than g3 to me, but according to the engine, g3 is best. I just don't like this idea of this king being exposed along these lines, whereas h3 gives you king the h2 square. Oh yeah, engine's finally caught up to me and agrees h3 is a better move. Just get rid of create the escape square for the king. You got long-term cubby house here on h2, and you can just look to pile pressure on the d pawn, maybe play rook d2 to get defense on the c pawn, and then go something like knight b5 and win the thing. It's very hard to stop all this. And instead of playing h3, white played rook f d3, and I mean that looks sensible. Yeah, according to the engine, we go b5 here, and we get this b5 idea going. Basically, say go ahead, take the pawn, and I'm gonna get to your pawns. And I think the idea is the same knight b6, knight c4 move. So you say to him, okay, go ahead, take my pawn. And then knight b6 is very strong here with the threat of knight c4, and moves like b3 obviously can't be played because the knight's on pre, and the knight can't move because the c pawn gets mucked up. If white just starts taking stuff like this, then you know, black can just immediately jump into here. Although according to the engine, knight c4 is better, and I have to agree. Hits the rook and hits the b2 pawn. And the idea is quite simple. Once you take the b2 pawn, you isolate these two things. There's still this back row idea, so white can't just grab this pawn and start doing this sort of stuff. Oh, and okay, and also the rook's on pre. Didn't see that. Okay, so yeah, after knight takes b2, the rook's on pre. The rook has to move somewhere, and yeah, this is going to fall, and then yeah, sure, this is going to disappear off the board, but this is isolated and going to fall. It looks like a dead drawn ending to me. White might be able to hang on to this pawn for a little while, but these rooks are just going to get so active because white has to waste a move getting his king to safety. Okay, let's get back to it. But instead of going for this thing, which is admittedly very hard to find, the idea of just giving up this pawn with tempo in order to get the knight to b6 and jump into c4, this is very difficult to find stuff. Rook c6 does seem, you know, sort of like a very sensible move, just getting ready to double on the c file and defending the pawn at the same time. And using that back row mate idea, you know, obviously rook takes is answered by rook takes, and then rook e1 mate. White has to waste a move getting his king to safety, and you know, like h3 once again looks good. He decided to go with g3, which the engine likes. I don't like the fact that the king could get checked on this second rank, but maybe it's okay. The king can rush to f3 very, very quickly. And so rook e6 was played to give the pawn an extra defender. And now this king probably needs to just start running in like this. Instead, knight b5 was played. And yeah, that's a sneaky move. I mean, the rook wants to zoom in and take this straight away, but of course it can't because of the knight fork. So yeah, the best move is we just have to kick the knight. This knight fork is still here, so we have to get rid of the knight fork and kick the knight with the same move, and then we can take the c2 pawn on the next move. So rook c5 is got to be the way to handle this. You just play rook c5 hitting the knight. And where does the knight actually go? If it goes to d4, then it blocks off the line of the rooks, and this rook can probably just safely retreat somewhere like e7. You know, maybe white can do this sort of thing and look to assault this pawn later on. It's still really good for white because getting rid of this isolated pawn is just very, very difficult. Is there anything else here? Looking at the engine suggestions. Knight c5 apparently. What? Huh? Ugh. Can you take it? Like after takes, knight takes, what's the deal here? Or maybe rook takes? That allows checks to occur. Check, check, grab the pawn. But yeah, this rook can just come to e2. Just give up the pawn, and then, you know, this is a pain. You don't want to start doing passive defensive moves like this. Even though you're a pawn up, this rook is just too well placed. And you know, it stops this king from getting active, and black can take the time to start running his king into the middle. You know, king here, 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 or something, or there, and in you go. You don't have to worry about knight here though. That's just an annoying little knight fork. So yeah, maybe a6 or something. Just get rid of that knight fork for now, and then start running the king in. You know, the problem is if this white king ever gets to f1 to chase the rook out, bye bye h pawn. So it looks pretty drawn due to the passive placing the rook. So you can't play a move like this. It's just conceding a draw straight away. Okay, so taking on d7, d6 is not a possibility. Yeah, knight c5 is interesting. Very interesting. According to the engine, rook c3 is the answer, and that makes a lot of sense. Just pin the knight to the rook, and yeah, it's a bit of a mess of a position. I do like the idea of rook c5. I think that gives you your best shot. And after knight d4, just you know, if you can get your king, you know, maybe not even rook e7, maybe rook e8 is best, because that allows the king to run over to here. Ideally, you want your rook to be planted like somewhere like here, for instance, and then you can go f5 and then run the king to protect the pawn straight in, and the rook on e4 is defended by the pawn. You just got to be so careful of knight forks and, you know, annoying little threats like knight into here, hitting the rook, followed by rook takes d6. It's hard to do. It's hard to find a good setup. I'm spending a lot of time on this position because I took a sneak peek of what black actually did, and that was this. And that's pretty much, yeah, I mean, black is in deep trouble, just falling straight into the knight fork. So black grabbed the b2 pawn, white grabbed this pawn here, but black's about to grab all this stuff. On the other hand, though, after knight c5, black has got a very interesting fortress here. You know, if he can grab this pawn, then you know, it's looking pretty good. He's not going to be able to because this rook is going to come back, or this rook here is going to go into here. This one's probably a little bit better by the looks of it. You know, your king, it doesn't matter about the check. It doesn't matter, your king wants to run in here, but you leave this rook eyeing the e pawn. But still, I'd be concerned that black could set up a fortress with something like you know, rook b4 or something, and then jump the rook into a4 and just sit there. You know, maybe with a rook on a5 and everything's protected, and it's very hard for white to actually find a way to break that fortress. And if he, oh, hang on, is there a knight fork going on here? Is that a thing? Wait, no, there's no knight fork. The rook's on pre. Just ignore me. Okay. So we played rook 6d2, yeah, and yeah, just like rook b4, rook b5, one of these two, and just jumping onto here. Looks like it's a pretty good idea. Yeah, rook b5 makes the most sense. You want to sit there, and then everything's protected. You know, what exactly does white do here? You know, after rook d8 check, the king can just move, and maybe g7 so that there's no rook h8 stuff. I don't know, but yeah. Maybe these rooks can get in behind and do something sneaky like that. But you know, once this rook is sitting here, it's hard to win. For white, I mean. Maybe his plan is to play rook here and then rook there, and try and win it that way. There's probably a way to break through. But black should be looking to set up fortresses like that to make it difficult for his opponent. He played rook b4. Yeah, that's good. I like that. Rook b5, rook b4, they're both pretty good. King g2 was played, yeah, running the king in. Then knight e4, no, I don't like that one. Sorry, Alex. I don't think this is the way to go about it. Looks like he's trying to get his pieces active, which is nearly always a great way to play. But this is a situation where you got to set up a fortress. Forget the activity and just you know, rook a4. Tie down this rook to the defense of the a pawn, keep your a pawn defended, and just sit there and say, okay, come and get me. I've got everything defended. How are you going to win? And sometimes you got to play like that. And I think particularly when you're the exchange down, setting up fortresses is often the way to play. Looks like he's trying to win or something. I'm not sure, but this just looks like it lets the rook infiltrate. Both rooks are just going to infiltrate, and this is pretty much game over. This rook just comes in here now, and you know, where does the king go? It can't go to f6. You just get mate in one. has to go to h6, and yeah, then the rooks come in behind, and this disappears, and it's looking pretty awful. You know, you can't do things like knight f6 because he just hits it with his rook, and it's all over. So yeah, knight e4 just threw the game away straight away. Rook d8, rook 8 d7. What? No, you want to use the other rook. You want to use this rook, not that rook. Wrong rook. Wrong rook, Oscar. Okay, king f6 was played. I mean, still very winning for white. White can just grab this h pawn. Was h6 forced, maybe? Just to keep this h pawn, going. The biggest problem is just a simple doubling on the second rank, seventh rank, and how do you deal with that? You've got this check here. I don't think it does anything. This pawn is on pre as well. Yeah, that knight moving has just ruined everything. Black's position just falls apart. Even after missing the much quicker win, this still wins. So king f6 was played, and then he grabbed this pawn here. King f5. What are you doing? That loses a piece, doesn't it? Because a rook check, knight in the way, g4 just deflects the defender. Rook f7. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. King takes, rook takes. This is all over. Whole rook down. And we can look at this for a while, but it doesn't really. Oh, yeah. Game over. Okay, it's actually a pretty good game. Very interesting stuff going on in the middle there. That e5 break. I mean, that's crucial to really truly understand these positions. You've got to understand that e5 break. And for both sides, black wants to either get e5 in or d5 in and try and play it at the exact right time, and white's in the same position. White's trying to find the best time to play the e5 break, and when he does, his main goal is to actually isolate the pawn, and that's exactly what Oscar did. He got e5 in and then used that e5 break to isolate the d pawn, isolate the d pawn for black, and then piled up on that pawn and won it. So he tried to go for the textbook win, and as you can see, black did have some really good options this game, but unfortunately he kind of missed it and fell into the main strategy where he just let his opponent just pile up on this pawn and win the thing. But yeah, he did have options, and obviously falling for the knight fork was terrible. But he did have ways to make this a far more complicated game than it needed to be, and that's really what you're trying to do when things positionally go south like this. Okay, thanks for listening. I hope you all learned something. Goodbye.